Hey everybody, how's it going? A little bit of a different kind of episode today. Uh, Something that, if I can, I actually want to share something I'm blessed with. One of the things I've been into for several years is family history. I love to study the genealogy of my family. My wife and her sister have been digging into their roots as well. The historian in me just absolutely loves this. Well, one of the things that we've learned about my wife's family is they actually have deep Jewish roots, uh, starting really with her grandmother and going back. It's not something that we can establish them officially, genetically as Jewish or anything like that. Her grandmother was actually a Christian missionary down in Peru, so we can't register as Jewish or anything like that. But it's really been a neat trip looking at the Jewish heritage that's there and tracing it back and going back through that. And as part of that, of course, it's awakened a deep love for the Jewish roots of our faith. Because really, the Christian faith itself comes out of Judaism. It is at its core Jewish. And so we've been exploring that more and digging into it more. And I actually just had a couple things arrive in the mail that I'm really excited about. We've actually been working with a group of Messianic Jews and going through this book, which I've had for a little bit. And it's just a wonderful book. It may shake up some of your ideas and things about what the scriptures really say and stuff. What I've actually been kind of surprised as I've been digging through this is how much of what's in here that I, for lack of a better way to put it, already knew and understood, and had wondered why I was a little different than certain other people who call themselves Christians. Okay, what's the difference there? Well, we just received in the mail a couple things that we had ordered a while ago. This is actually from a gentleman named David Stern, and he basically is bringing out the Jewish roots and heritage of the New Testament with it. And right along with that, we've also got this. If you saw my video about Bible translations, you saw that I've got a bunch of them. Well, this one I'm really looking forward to digging into and reading because it's again bringing out the Jewish heritage and roots of our scriptures. One of the things that we so often forget about is we get this idea that Jesus was Jew or that Jesus was Christian. We forget that he was a Jewish rabbi named Yeshua. That we call him the Christ, but what that is it's a derivative of a Greek word that is attempting to describe the Jewish Messiah or Mashiach. So we forget that the apostles, the disciples, were all Jewish. That our whole, what we call the New Testament, is actually all written by Jewish people, that they never stopped becoming Jews. They never stopped living as Jews. When they realized that Yeshua was their Messiah, that for them it fulfilled their scriptures. It didn't replace them. In fact, as I've been going through my Sermon on the Mount series, one of the big things I emphasize was what Jesus said, that he did not come to abolish the law, but he came to fulfill it. And our understanding of what the law is, because as Christians, we sometimes really get it confused. Even things like the words we use, Old Testament, New Testament, we think of it as a testimony or like a will and testament. We're really, the words come from the Latin Vulgate, which is a translation of the Greek Septuagint, and actually that word is a transliteration. And if you look at the actual word that the Jewish people use, it's a covenant. So even the word testament is not a real good description, and part of it is because we sit there and go, oh, Old Testament, will, and testament, that must mean it's dead. And it's not. So even just some of the lingo and the connotations of words that we use, it's a good reminder that, our modern connotation isn't what they thought of. It's not how they lived it. How did Jesus perceive the scriptures when he was walking the earth? We forget that Jesus didn't speak English. He actually taught in Hebrew and Aramaic. And that his disciples, the ones who wrote the letters, then wrote that in the modern Greek, but even in their mind, they were translating from what was originally in Hebrew and said that way, and then writing it in Greek for a wider audience. And then we're trying to take these Hebrew concepts that were translated into Greek and then retranslate them again into English. And if we miss that culture and context, we miss so much of it. So I'm really excited about this, because as I go through my scriptural readings, my devotions, one of the things, again, the historian in me, hey, I want to dig this out. I want to learn more about this. One of the things that has really been becoming apparent to me in the last several weeks, as I've been starting to dig more and more into that, is how grateful I am for those who trained me, taught me. My father-in-law, who had a deep love and respect and regard for the Jewish heritage and culture, and how that related to the scriptures and made them come alive, and how we understand them as a result. But I'm also finding that my professors at college, I attended a private Christian college called Bethany that's no longer around. I was not a ministerial candidate. I wasn't a Bible study student, but everybody that goes through the college had to have a core of biblical studies on the Old and New Covenants, interpretational skills, certain books of the Bible. So I took a class on the Pentateuch, or the Torah, which is the first five books of the Bible. I took another one that was about several of Paul's writings, Shaul in Hebrew. And I realized, as the more I dig into this, and realized what incredible and wonderful professors and teachers I was blessed with at college. Different things that I find a lot of Christians struggle and don't understand, because they don't understand the heritage. They don't understand the roots. They don't understand the history. They don't understand the culture that came out of. I'm realizing that I know because my professors taught this at a Christian school, that they gave us this foundation in many cases. They gave us this background. And so as I talk to other Christian leaders and pastors about some of this, and they're looking at me like, what planet are you on? I'm going, oh Lord, thank you so much for the teaching and grounding that you gave me. And that's kind of the point I want to encourage you to do, is as you learn more about God and about His Word, to take time to learn about the culture, about the roots, about the faith that Jesus practiced. For him, the Bible was what we call the Old Testament. It was the Jewish scriptures. That what we call the New Testament is the Messianic writings. It's a continuation of it. It's not a replacement, but it's built upon it. And that without it, you can't have one without the other. That so many of the words that we're used to thinking of in our American Christian terms aren't necessarily even what they really were. A good example is if you do a real word study on the words synagogue and ecclesia, or church, how, we get this idea that, hey, Jesus is talking about the church. There was no such thing as church in Jesus' day. They didn't have a church. There was no concept of church. That if Jesus were to say what we say now is church, they would look at him like he's on Mars. What is this church thing? What are you talking about? Because ecclesia, the word that we translate as church, simply meant a gathering of people. That people who would get together, and it could be religious, it could be non-religious, it could be a political gathering, it could be a social gathering, it could be just a mob, and so it referred to different things, and so there wasn't church. The word that gets translated as synagogue would be a facility where people could get together, and I'm making this simple, but as an example, the court, when you had a public court, the same word that we translate as synagogue was actually used for that same kind of setting. So when Jesus went on trial in front of the Romans, there was a synagogue, even though it wasn't Jewish. The word synagogue itself isn't Jewish, at least not in the biblical terms. It's come to mean that over the centuries, and in the same way we say church, Christian gathering, mosque equals Muslim gathering, synagogue equals Jewish gathering. At the time, any of those would have been the same word, because there were no words for mosque. There was no word for church. They all would have been a synagogue of the ecclesia. In fact, that's actually why at a couple spots when the writers say the synagogue of the Jews, they're adding the of the Jews so it can clarify which synagogue, which group is meeting. This is the Jewish group as opposed to the Roman group or the Greek group or these other synagogues that weren't Jewish, because a synagogue could be anything. And so as you get a chance to dig in to a lot of this, you start realizing how our culture, our concepts, and so often we can miss actually what is being said innocently enough, not intentional, not because people are lying or whatever, but we take our own culture and understanding and apply it without realizing and remembering that Jesus didn't live in our culture, that he didn't live with our concepts, that our ideas of right and wrong sometimes, of slavery and race, are different than what he lived with. And trying to take our modern understanding and stick it on there instead of flipping it around and letting the understandings, the culture, the concepts, and the ideas of their time speak to us. It means some work sometimes. It means some digging. It means multiple references. Yeah, and if you're not reading the Bible anyways, that's all going to be a big challenge. But I encourage you, the very first, read. Don't get scared away by the scriptures because it's a different culture. Read it because you're going to glean, you're going to gain, you're going to understand. But then if you want a challenge to really get to know, begin to dig into some of the cultures. There are some wonderful books about there that will talk about the culture, the times, the concepts out there. These are just a couple of the newest ones I've had because I've got a number of things I've read over the years. And maybe just kind of get a look at something like this. Be aware, it is in a different order because it uses the Jewish order of scriptures and other things. Read it alongside your regular Bible. I encourage people to read more than one version. And so this is something good to read alongside, and that way you can kind of go back and forth and gain a deeper understanding and something good or something else like that. But don't ever stop learning. Don't ever stop digging. Don't ever stop seeking for a greater understanding, and to be willing to correct yourself, because sometimes we get stuck on ideas and we don't like to hear something that differs from ours, and how dare you challenge me. But sometimes that challenge will make us search deeper for what we know and what we don't know, and for a deeper understanding and a richer knowledge and growth. So that's my sharing. A couple new things and a couple things I hope to challenge you with. Let me know what you think, and I'd love to hear back from you. Thanks so much, and God bless.